I'm so ready for the iPhone 13, and Apple actually did something that I'm super happy about because it really frustrated me last year. Now that we have all the facts, I've got my pre-orders all set, so let's take a look at the iPhone 13 and see if one of these new models is a good fit for you. So just like with the iPhone 12, Apple announced 4 different models of the 13, and they seem to really be leaning into this grouping of the mini with the regular 13 and then the 2 Pro models. So I'll split them up as well. From a design standpoint, we're not getting major changes. We're still getting squared off edges, and the overall look is very similar to that of the 12. And we're also seeing the ceramic shield glass, and we're getting IP68 water resistance. Where we start seeing some changes is with the camera module, which now has a diagonal dual camera system versus the vertical one on the iPhone 12. We're also seeing 5 new colors, and I had a really tough time choosing between the blue, the midnight, starlight, and the red, which I know doesn't really narrow it down by much, but I finally made my choices. I know that some people were hoping that the notch would be completely removed, but instead Apple reconfigured the true depth camera and the other components and reduced the size of the notch by 20%. Apple also mentioned that they're using upcycled plastic water bottles for the new antennas, and the interior was redesigned for a larger battery, which I'm super happy about. I mean, I'm always gonna want more battery life if I can get it. Now, the next important upgrade was to the screen, which is a new Super Retina XDR display with improved power efficiency, and it's 28% brighter with up to 800 nits versus 625 on the iPhone 12. This should make it easier to use the new iPhone if you're outside or if you're in any situation where you're having to deal with reflections. We're also getting support for Dolby Vision, HDR10, and HLG at a maximum brightness of 1200 nits for HDR content. That's the same maximum brightness that we had on the 12, so I'm curious to test out just how different HDR content looks on the new display. Moving on to performance, Apple upgraded the chip from the A14 on the iPhone 12 to the new A15 Bionic on the iPhone 13. This new chip uses 5nm technology and close to 15 billion transistors to improve performance and power efficiency. And the new 6-core CPU consists of 2 high-performance cores and then 4 high-efficiency cores, so you should have plenty of power for anything you throw at it. Now, one of the things I plan on using all this power for is gaming. Now, of course, I'll edit photos and I'll edit video as well, but I just can't wait to see how this 4-core GPU handles more demanding games. We're also getting a 16-core neural engine, which you may not think you care about if you're just a casual user, but it does impact everyday features like camera performance. We're getting a new video encoder, a new display engine, and a new image signal processor. And this should help the new camera system get even better results than the iPhone 12, which I was already really happy with. If you've watched this channel before, you probably know that I'm kind of a camera nerd, and a lot of what makes a good photo on a phone comes from the computational photography that the phone is doing behind the scenes. So the more power it has, the more advanced those algorithms can be. As far as the cameras themselves, we're getting a 12 megapixel f1.6 wide camera, which is similar to what we had on the 12, but Apple says that this is the largest sensor that they've ever used with a dual camera system. And without getting into the weeds here, let me just tell you that that's good news. Now, another important camera improvement is sensor shift OIS, or optical image stabilization, which means that the phone can detect your hand movement when you're trying to hold it steady, and then it will try to offset them by actually moving the sensor. That's going to get you much better shots in low light, and it was only available on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, so it's great to see it trickle down to the lower end models. Now, the 12 megapixel ultra wide camera has also been redesigned with a faster sensor, which again, I'm very excited to test. Now, if you're interested in video, Apple introduced a new feature called cinematic mode, which uses AI to rack focus from one subject to another. So for example, if you're the main subject and you're looking at someone else in the frame, the phone will recognize that and they'll focus on the other person. It can also anticipate when a subject is about to enter into the frame and then rack focus to this new subject. Now, this is something that I'm used to controlling with my cameras, and I'm super curious to see how well this automated feature works. So you can expect that to be included in my follow-up videos. Now, if you want more control, you could still do that manually by tapping on a subject that's on the screen in order to get it in focus, or tapping on it again and then have the iPhone 13 track it. Now let's move on to battery life. And I was a little concerned here because all this new processing power is going to require some serious power. Well, Apple reports that iPhone 13 mini users will experience an additional hour and a half of battery life versus the 12 mini. And then iPhone 13 will have 2.5 hour longer battery life than the iPhone 12. And that's a pretty meaningful difference to me. And then the last thing that I want to mention about the first two iPhones is the price. So we're still looking at $699 for the iPhone 13 mini and $799 for the iPhone 13. And that's with an increased starting capacity of 128 gigs. And I always look for good trade-in options when I upgrade. Now let's look at the two higher end models, the iPhone 13 Pro and the Pro Max. And this is where Apple made a change to something that really frustrated me about the iPhone 12 Pro. Before we get to that, let's look at the new colors. We got graphite, gold, silver, and Sierra blue. As far as the design, I think the iPhone 13 Pro colors look amazing. We're still getting a 20% smaller notch, a 3-camera module on the back, along with a texture matte glass. And as far as performance, we're getting the A15 Bionic chip again, but now we're getting a 5-core GPU versus the 4-core on the iPhone 13. And Apple says that the 13 Pro has the fastest graphics performance of any smartphone ever. Now this should make it an outstanding phone for gaming, and it should also help improve some camera features, which I'll get to in a minute. Now moving on to the display, we're getting one of the most important upgrades that we're going to see. We're getting a maximum brightness of 1000 nits, which is 25% higher than the 800 on the 12 Pro. But even more important, we're now getting the ProMotion technology that we have on the iPad Pro. Now, if you're not familiar with it, ProMotion is Apple's adaptive refresh rate, which is able to change the refresh rate in real time. And it does that in order to balance giving you the most fluid user experience with maximizing battery life. So if you're doing something like reading and nothing is changing on the display, it will drop the refresh rate to 10 Hz. But if you're scrolling or navigating the UI, then it will bump it up to 120 Hz for really smooth animations. This is also going to be great for those of you who plan on gaming on the iPhone 13 Pro, where of course a faster refresh rate is always appreciated. Now let's get to the camera system and what got me so excited about this year's models versus last year's. Like I said earlier, I love cameras. So last year I wanted to get the best camera system that Apple had, but it was only available on the iPhone 12 Pro Max, which wasn't going to work for me because I didn't want such a big phone. So I ended up not getting the features that I wanted and getting the 12 Pro, which I thought would be a better size for me. Now this year, Apple is offering the same camera system on both the Pro and the Pro Max. So regardless of which size you get, you're gonna get all of these improvements. We're getting a new 77mm telephoto camera with 3x optical zoom, an ultra-wide camera with an f1.8 aperture and better low light performance, then finally a wide camera with a larger f1.5 aperture and the largest sensor on any iPhone camera. Now I can't wait to play around with these cameras and see how they perform for different types of photos and in different lighting conditions. And I'm actually really excited about using the new ultra-wide camera for macro shots. It has a minimum focus distance of 2 centimeters, which means that you can get really close to the subject and still have the autofocus work for you. Now, all 3 cameras also have night mode, and we're getting new features like photographic styles and smart HDR4. We're also getting improved video features, which I'm just gonna touch on now, but I'll definitely get into in my more detailed reviews. So hit that subscribe button. Now, one thing that I have to mention is that the iPhone 13 Pro creates a depth map for video, meaning that you can technically change your focus plane or what's in focus after you shoot. So can you imagine shooting a video and then whether you missed your focus or you just change your mind later, you're gonna be able to go ahead and correct it in post? I want that for my real cameras. Now, as far as battery life, we're seeing similar improvements to the 13 and 13 mini. We're getting 1.5 hour longer battery life on the 13 Pro versus the 12 Pro, and then 2.5 hours longer on the 13 Pro Max versus the 12 Pro Max. Now, as far as price, the 6.1-inch 13 Pro starts at $999 and the 6.7-inch Pro Max starts at $1099. And the available storage size starts at 128 gigs and goes all the way up to 1 terabyte. So before I give you my final thoughts, I do my best to read every comment. So if you have any questions or anything that you want me to cover in my more detailed reviews, let me know in the comments section. I ordered more than one of these, so I'll be able to give you more insights into the various models, and I'm super excited to have 120 Hz on an iPhone. I think that adding all the camera features to both Pro models was a great move by Apple, and at the other end, the Mini is going to be a great option for those who prefer a smaller device. Hopefully this video was helpful. Click on my face to subscribe and then watch this video. You know what I always say? Buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.